So I can figure did the link change up?
It's just like when I try to look for this link, it doesn't work. So I don't know if anyone else can see it, but I can see it.
EDW, can you see the link? When you click on it, does it say video unavailable? That's what it looks like for one update that's about to happen. We're T-minus. Yeah, I got that.
I also told you, I was like, okay, then I told you.
If you tell me what it is, I'll probably prefer the answer.
And I was like, oh wait.
I kind of want to see what.
Oh, we're good.
Okay, can you double check the link?
No, it's a new link. It's a new
okay.
link. But,
It's a new link.
but
We're going to tell you who to email that to. Email it to me.
do you want to just read it? Or, yeah, because I don't think I can. I can read it to you.
We're going to get started in just 2 minutes, y'all. Let's go ahead and get some coffee if you haven't already. Get some water. You don't got to get quiet yet, though. That's fine.
Backslash.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, yeah, I think it is.
Email it.
You can email this too. We have a link.
Morning, y'all. We'll get started in just a minute.
Unavailable to go because it hasn't started. Should be working.
It was working.
Yeah, really?
You tried that?
Harvard is withholding the green bandwidth.
That's how I feel. Oh, is that
Do you have a
Okay, I just emailed it to you, so, but like, yeah, it's working.
No, it's working. But it doesn't look like it's working right now.
No.
I'll do this for you.
Now I get the camera. It's working now?
Yes.
Okay.
I was shooting it.
Okay.
Okay, cool. Don't rush. All right, let's do this.
We're good.
Great. Heather, okay, and the purple jacket. Okay, great. Thank you so much. Just one quick announcement about the Wi-Fi. So many folks also welcome. Good morning, almost afternoon now. Glad to see all y'all here. How are you feeling this morning? We're here, we're present. Hopefully if we imbibe caffeine, we're caffeinated. Okay. We have one announcement about the Wi-Fi. Folks have been having lots of issues. We have a wonderful librarian amongst us. That's Heather. Heather's wearing a beautiful purple patterned jacket over here. Yes. Heather's going to help onboard you on Wi-Fi if you're having issues around that. So just kind of give Heather a little wave if you're experiencing some technical difficulties. And Heather will try, what pronouns do you use, Heather? She, her. And she'll help onboard you for the Wi-Fi, okay? So thank you, Heather.
Are we good on the live stream?
I think we got to come over here, though.
Well, isn't that?
It's
Oh.
I will angle the camera wherever
Thank
Heather.
you.
you are.
You ready?
Yeah.
Welcome, everyone. Are we feeling okay? Okay, good. So this convening was conceived of as a space for sex workers, current and former, and trusted accomplice community to share with the myriad of experiences that they have living a life mediated by technology, surveillance, and the varying degrees of criminalization. Police harassment, loss of work, incarceration, bank account seizure, etc.
We intend for this gathering to be grounded in active listening, affirmation, and continued growth alongside each other. We recognize that we are all bringing different experiences with the criminal legal system and access points to technology or resources to this convening.
We recognize that sex working, trading, hustling people have been surveilled in ways that far exceed their access to technology. FOSTA SESTA is just another whorephobic law that polices the movements of working possibilities and harm reduction practices of the sex working community. Meaning FOSTA SESTA was not the beginning of anything new, but rather the expression of calculated and consistent attacks on the folks who trade sex.
Some communities are policed more than others. Black, brown, indigenous, queer, trans, imprisoned, and gender nonconforming family of ours have been resisting carceral violence and leading other communities in shared analysis and action toward a better world. We rise up alongside those who are experiencing the racist, transphobic police terror that is rampant in our current society.
We hope that through collectively holding space for all of our experiences and acknowledging these varying degrees of tech access, stigma, and criminalization, that we can strategize and fight together to build real solidarity in action.
As we organize and share knowledge inside an institution with a history of stealing from marginalized communities and not crediting work, we ask you to listen to one another, hold each other with care and compassion, and be ready to complicate the narrative surrounding FOSTA and SESTA. We have a few announcements. We do have press in the room, and so we want to be very transparent about that. If you are part of the media in any way, shape, or form, and you're in that capacity today, if you have the ability to stand, will you please stand? If you do not have the ability to stand, will you raise a hand? Awesome. Thank you all so much, members of the press, for being here and for respecting that transparency.
And so another thing with that, if press are asking questions and you don't feel comfortable answering, just tell them that. If someone's not being respectful, wave over to one of us and we will make sure that they are being respectful. Also, that being said, we don't know who is in the room.
Always.
Always. So you never know if there is a cop present, so please be mindful of that in what you say and how you interact with people.
Yeah, keep yourself safe, keep each other safe. Don't disclose anything that you wouldn't, want to just be out there in the general world, right? We never know always who's in the room. Let's do some agreements.
Yeah.
So we have a few extended community agreements for the convening. It was this page when you came in, part of your packet. We want to set some broader intentions for all of us. So we kind of shared those intentions for the convening, the inspiration, why we gathered folks here today, but we have some convening agreements for the broader community that we want to share.
Number 1, we respect the diversity of identities, including gender, our pronouns, race, nationality, religious background, differing abilities, different working survival strategies, and other vibrant, multifaceted aspects of who we are.
We're also going to honor each other's boundaries, both emotional and physical. And this includes crosstalk. Please do not advise anyone on their share. Comment only from your own perspective and experiences, grounding in those I statements.
We give care to how we communicate and use language that is clear, inclusive, and rooted in the I. Mindful to allow time for others to speak.
We want to show up fully and commit to being accountable to one another. Please listen, turn cell phones on silent in this space, and use discretion once we exit this space. We will not out anyone on social media or on the streets.
We give importance to self-care, body care, and spirit care, and each person's individual truth about what they need to feel their fullest and wholest. If anyone is feeling triggered or unsafe, please let one of us or Kendra's running an errand in the back know, and we'll do our best to sort of make sure that you're taken care of.
We want to also care for the space that we are in and acknowledge that we are on occupied Massachusetts land. Okay.
All are always welcome to share, but please give priority to marginalized voices in our discussion.
I want to also give a special shout out and acknowledgement to the prison divestment campaign here at Harvard. They've been really leading the fight to get Harvard to divest from the prison industrial complex. I want to urge folks to read their newly released report. You can access it on their website as well as on Twitter. It's their pinned tweet right now. So if you're on Twitter and you're searching prison divestment, Harvard prison divestment campaign, you'll find them, and you're going to find that report that shows just how much Harvard is committed to upholding the prison industrial complex and the fight that people are waging right here to get them to divest.
And I think our last announcement is just acknowledging the fact of how routinely sex workers work and scholarly work is cannibalized by academia. So while you're here, if you learn from sex workers, quote them, or better yet, pay them to write the piece that you're being paid to write. So just keeping that in mind to not steal our work. And I think we're ready to get started.
Absolutely. So we want to invite our first contributor up. That's going to be Melissa Jarrett-Grant. Melissa?
Hi, everyone. I'm going to be recorded by Grant, who got my permission for that. So if you see him sort of fluttering around, know that that's fine with me, and he's not going to be doing that to everyone. So the first thing I want to say is we are at Harvard, but we are also in a place called Massachusetts. And Harvard has always been, for me, as someone who grew up in Massachusetts, sort of a bubble within a bubble within a bubble. So I just wanted to ask, is anybody here born in Massachusetts besides me? Okay, cool. So there's some of us. I consider this place and sort of the neighborhood around this place a second home. Basically everything interesting about me in terms of politics and literature was acquired from hanging out on these streets as a teenager who was not necessarily welcome, but gave myself an education. Back then, I thought the best way to publish my work online was to put PDFs of zines that I had made on a homepage, because it was 1994, and who was going to read something as long as an essay on a web page? Now that's my job. So welcome to Massachusetts. Welcome to the bubble. One of the things that Juan asked me to do is to kind of go back and think about how we got here, both the law, SESTA, but also like this group of people, like why we are here in this room. And a lot of my archive of that actually doesn't exist because it went down on Signal. So I delete my Signal messages. I can't go all the way back and say what the first exchange I had with someone about SESTA FOSTA was, but I know that it wasn't even called that at the time, and it was probably in January of 2018. For the first time in my journalism career, I was on staff at a news organization that let me chase stories about trafficking and sex work wherever they went. Sometimes that was a very tough place. A few months before all of this went down, a massage worker named Yang Song fell to her death amidst a vice raid. Emma Whitford and I teamed up for the first time, and for several months we covered the aftermath of Yang Song's death, the raid that preceded it, the national groups lobbying against massage businesses like the one she died in, and the long wait her family endured while her death was investigated. The top law enforcement official in the county prosecutor found no fault in the police. I almost didn't even write about the law that became SESTA FOSTA. In December of 2017, while I was on that story, Kate Diadamo, who is a longtime sex worker rights advocate, and I'd known her for almost 10 years, and I talked to her all the time, she sent me a proposed amendment to a bill called FOSTA. A few weeks after that, she followed up and sent me a Congressional Quarterly article about it. A few days later, she let me know she was organizing a community call on what she called SESTA FOSTA, and that was on Wednesday, January 10th, 2018. I just want to recognize that I can even reconstitute this history because I'm someone who still has access to my email and my social media. The websites where the story I told about this history are still online. The next day after that, January 11th, a group called World Without Exploitation lobbied Congress in support of SESTA. World Without Exploitation is helmed by a former Brooklyn prosecutor named Lauren Hirsch. The group is pretty new, and they were founded in part by the Coalition Against Trafficking in Women, who have organized women's rights activists as far back as the Clinton administration, not just against trafficking, but to press governments to define all commercial sex as trafficking. CATW, that's their acronym, sees sex workers' rights advocates and their prominent allies like Amnesty International as their opposition. And in fact, CATW will not use the term sex work. Their talking points, World Without Exploitation's talking points to the Senate on SESTA, said that ultimately what they wanted was an end to the global sex trade. I published my first story on SESTA on January 26, 2018. I remember a conversation with Kate where I wanted to know her take. Was this bill even going anywhere? In my story, I emphasized how some anti-trafficking advocates were concerned about the collateral consequences of the legislation. I talked to legal experts who told me SESTA's proponents claim that SESTA was necessary because otherwise law enforcement couldn't go after websites like Backpage. Just didn't make sense. The law that they wanted to amend with SESTA, Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, it would not protect Backpage operators from federal criminal prosecution if they were actually involved in facilitating trafficking. Alexandra Levy-Elderman, who's now a senior staff attorney at the Human Trafficking Legal Center, at that time she told me, Section 230, as it's currently written, would not prevent a federal prosecution of Backpage if there was a case to be made. And that's a big if. So fast forward to April 6th, the same day that Congress sent SESTA FOSTA to Donald Trump for his signature. That afternoon, the Department of Justice seized Backpage.com, the website that SESTA FOSTA was supposed to take down. After weeks of arguments about why this legislation was necessary to attack sites hosting sex work ads, it turned out the government could target Backpage without it. SESTA wasn't even signed into law until April 12th, 6 days later. So what happened after all of that is what we'll be talking about today. But in short, sex workers were right. If you remember one thing from this entire day, sex workers were right. Online ad platforms vanished overnight. Workers lost income, housing, and safety. And sex workers found community. The first time Blunt and I talked about what would become hacking hustling was the day after Backpage was seized. And 6 months later, we convened a 2-day-long conference at I-Beam in Brooklyn involving many of the people in this room. The flip side of the erasure and violence of SESTA FOSTA is the overwhelming visibility and resilience of sex working people. That's manifest in public demonstrations, which brought out thousands on the first International Force Day after the law went into effect. It's demonstrated in activists who've successfully pushed the media to confront presidential candidates for their support of sex work and their votes for SESTA. This is a sidebar. I would say without their expertise, this conference would not be possible, and that's true. But that would also be to absent myself by saying their when I could say we. I could not do my job as a journalist without sex workers. I have my job as a journalist because my sex work gave me a measure of freedom and resources to build a career despite declining conditions in the media industry. Despite what might look glamorous from the outside, journalism today is rife with low wages, precarious gigs, and the exploitation that comes from a profit interest trumping the public good. Yet no one ever tried to exempt journalism from Section 230 to protect me from any of that. And sidebar. The visibility and resilience of sex workers is absolutely manifest in this conference. It's why we are here. Hacking Hustling was created as an act of harm reduction so that sex workers and their communities could resist criminalization and survive in a post-SESTA world. It's a red neon sign declaring that sex workers did not go away. It's a place where all of the debate about how the internet should be regulated to keep bad things from happening, election interference, revenge porn, etc., it all becomes very, very concrete. We are the carve-out to the law that people say made the internet possible. We are also the ones who have always been the canary in the coal mine for censorship, moral panic, gentrification, political repression. The very first talk I gave about sex work, and platform censorship was in Berlin at a conference called Republica 9 years ago. You can, for now, still find that video on YouTube. Once I went looking for Creative Commons photos of me so someone could maybe update my Wikipedia page, and many of those photos are screenshots from that talk that I found on a foot fetish wiki that made them open source. At least my heels will live on the internet, somewhere between the respectability of a European tech conference and an online community who are fans of something that still manages to pass as not porn. That is the knife edge that sex workers have always walked online, even before SESTA. In some ways, this law helped draw a box around censorship we had been facing online for well over a decade. And at the end of the day, actually, we'll have a discussion about that history. SESTA is an escalation of a long-standing practice by tech platforms. Sex workers made the internet somewhere people wanted to spend a lot of time. We are the quote-unquote unintended consequences of policy we had no voice in. My argument here and my hope for today is that we can ask for lawmakers, for tech companies, for those anti-sex work groups, how unintended were those consequences? Thank you.
We're gonna take a 5-minute break so everyone can get pizza, and we're gonna start our next talk.
We're not worried about that so much as
Yeah, just I know that there was a section, an entire segment on the schedule that's not recorded, but that's fine. Yeah, it's just every time.
we were hoping that people were contributing with
But if you're willing, it's a okay. I just it's only, but yeah.
Is it muted?
Oh,
No, you know what? No, we don't. We're still recording.
There's gonna be
Okay, so
yeah, that is.
let's do.
Should we check that
Let's do.
But no time. Yes, please. Well, I'll make sure to say that. go ahead and do this then. So. So we're going to get started in just another second, y'all. So please get some food if you have not already. Get something to drink. Get settled in. I wanted to just give a brief kind of introduction of myself. We're waiting, hopefully, for my comrade Alicia to call in. She's an incarcerated person, and so there's a lot of things that could happen, right? That could go wrong with her ability and capacity to call in. And so we have some prepared remarks. We'll get into that. But I'm going to give a little bit of an introduction, a few opening remarks right at noon, and then hopefully Alicia will be able to call in around 12:05 based on a lot of hurdles and obstacles. So please bear with us. It's actually quite appropriate that we might be engaging with some of these obstacles because this is not only a gathering for sex working people, right, and tech, but that also means some of our comrades are navigating prison surveillance and prison technologies, which are actively, aspects of the mundane everyday violence that they're surviving and existing under. So that being said, hopefully she's still able to call and we can have her voice in the space with us. My name's Red. I also go by Britt. I use they, them pronouns. I'm an organizer with the Support Hose Collective, which started in Chicago and is now helping kind of build radical community in New York City as well. And I forgot to use the mic, and thank you for reminding me to do that. Is this on? Oh, amplification. Yeah, absolutely. Can folks hear me at this volume? Feel good? Okay. Thank you for that. So yeah, my name's Red, they, them pronouns, activist and organizer with the Support Hose Collective. It's a currently closed collective, meaning we're not bringing new membership in until our comrade Alicia is free, and we can reassess and kind of feel where we're at and take stock of our new priorities. Support Hose basically exists as an agitational and educational formation. So folks who are looking to support other sex working people as they take up public space, as they do teach-ins, as they're doing internal political education within their own community, being able to provide resources, support, know your rights trainings for demonstrators. Those are things that we have been doing for going on 4 years now. And so that's a relationship that we've been building alongside and with Alicia Walker as well. So I'm just going to start with some of these remarks, and then hopefully Alicia will be able to call in and join us. So this talk is titled Prison Surveillance, Communication Technology, and Inside-Outside Organizing. My entire friendship and comradeship with my fellow Support Hose Collective organizer, Alicia Walker, is mediated by prison technologies. Our knowing each other in this life was determined by state violence and also technology, digital journalism. The mutual care and love that we continue to foster and grow between us is routinely scrutinized, accessed, recorded, and has been used to further punish her while she's incarcerated. So why is Alicia Walker incarcerated? Alicia is a criminalized survivor of gender-based violence and whorephobic racist violence. She's a Black sex working person. And when she was 19, she was working, seeing a client of hers who she had seen before. His name was Alan Filan, a white man who was fairly well off and well connected in the community, a teacher at a private school. He demanded unsafe and unprotected sex from Alicia and her friend who was working with her. They said no, those aren't our terms. He became agitated under the influence of multiple substances, and he began to attack both of them, and they fought back. Alicia was able to save not only her own life, but the life of her fellow worker and friend that evening. Alan later died of the wounds from the scuffle, and Alicia received 15 years and was charged with second-degree manslaughter, and is currently incarcerated at Decatur Correctional in downstate Illinois. So Alicia was punished for surviving. She was told by a judge that she was a criminal mastermind, a monster. Those are actual words being used by the judge in prosecution. And her work, her manner of dress, her identity, right, as a sex working person was put on trial, as well as a complete kind of lack of acknowledgement of her right to survive, right? That was completely negated during that trial. So they refused to see her as a black woman, as a queer woman, as a sex working woman, as somebody whose life was worth living and surviving, right, and saving. That's kind of what that judge said. She's calling in right now, y'all.
Yes. Prepaid collect call from Query. An inmate at Illinois DOC Correctional Center. This call is subject to recording and monitoring. To accept charges, press 1. To refuse charges,
Be aware.
Y'all get the whole experience.
Any call from Illinois DOC will result in inmate disciplinary action, and the involved end user's phone number will be locally blocked from future calls from all Illinois DOC facilities. Thank you for you.
Hey, babe. Hey, you feeling okay? What kind of drama? Can we talk about it? Yeah, but we can talk about it later, right? Okay. I'm going to read a couple more comments to set up what we're going to be saying. Does that feel all right to you? Okay, so I'm going to have you not on speaker, okay? And then I'll put you on speaker in a second. Okay, so hold on. Alicia and I have been communicating disconnected for 4 years. We've used every available outlet for sanctioned communication. Connect Network, JPay, Securus Tech, GTL Network, the United States Postal Service, Amazon, and each of these methods falls short, intentionally prohibiting an authentic connection in every sense of that word. Our mutual care is shot through and fractured by violent technologies. And this is deliberate. This is profitable. This is working exactly as designed. Nothing about these conditions is broken or dysfunctional. And also, that doesn't mean that what we've built together isn't real or less valuable. That doesn't mean that our work is lagging behind or less than. It means that we work harder, enduring more obstacles, more disconnected calls, and truncated video visits. I'm going to pose some reflective questions to Alicia to flesh out and describe aspects of inside-outside organizing and relationship building, which necessarily has to face prison and state surveillance, censorship, and also navigates the special role that technology plays in connecting and disconnecting us. Please consider writing down any questions that you might be having as Alicia and I are talking that might come up for you. And if you have those, you can pass them up to Blunt right there. And if we have time, I'll go through those and ask her. All right, friend, you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, let me turn up this volume here. So that first question, which I saw that my email wasn't approved to be delivered to you until 1:42 a.m. this morning. And I sent that like almost 3 days ago now. So I don't even know if you saw it. Yeah, okay. So we'll take time. It's exactly what we had talked about previously, but I really wanted you to have that. So I wonder if somebody wanted to keep that from us.
Probably, because they knew what time I was calling.
Right. So let's start off with this. Speaking of all these policies in the prison, what kinds of policies are in place that you feel like limit your speech? And then how are those things enforced? Like, what's off limits?
As far as rules or as far as communicating with the outside world?
Like, as far as the prison rules, right? About like how you can speak and act, whether it be like on.
You cannot voice your own opinion as your state can write you up for insulin. You cannot violate, which is critical. You cannot roll your eyes. You can use your reckless eye contact. And your emails, there cannot be anything sexual or explicit. They like to keep the cussing down to a minimum. They don't want you to talk. If there's an actual rule that you cannot ask for money from anyone that is not your family through an email, or it won't be delivered. There's so many emails that I did not get or
Right.
returned because of people thinking about their beliefs
Right.
or how they feel like this is corrupt. There's so many rules that I feel like they just make it up as they go along.
That's right. And I mean, we know how much it costs to talk to one another, right? Like we know how much it costs to support you. And so that deliberate act of censoring you asking for help, like that's violence.
Yeah. They literally limit everything that you do in here. Everything.
So maybe going off of that, how does the way that you talk or like the topics that we talk about, right, or that you talk about with other people, how does that have to change based on what technology we're using, right? Like whether we're writing letters or emails or video visits or phone or in-person visits, like how do you change the way you talk across these like technology platforms?
There's so many topics that I want to talk about, but I don't. And I guess I kind of just fell into I'm basically institutionalized. I don't talk about things that I want. I don't get to express the way that I feel. I don't get to voice my opinion because either they're going to send it through or they're going to monitor my calls. So I kind of fall into it to avoid any problems. And it comes to the thing that it's like it becomes normal to that's something that you don't talk about. There's just topics that you do not speak on.
And
Because you don't want to be around.
right. And does it change, like, I know that's the overall and like the kind of general way that things have to go about, like the way that we do our organizing talks or the way that we're even talking about like upcoming protests or demonstrations or like the writing that we're working on. I know that we always have to be like really deliberate and intentional in the way that we talk about that stuff. Do you feel like there's one platform over another one that sometimes you're able to get more out or not at all?
I mean, I feel like all the phone calls, but I might get backlash from it later on.
Right.
Why are you thinking about this? And what does this mean? Because during this time, I can speak openly. Unless they just call, unless they just let me know, and they click my phone off.
Right.
I mean, 9 times out of 10, my emails won't go through. If I'm speaking about something, or I won't get the emails. My letters will never make it to me. My mail has been lost countless times where I just sent back to people or it just completely disappeared and I can't get it. It's just, there's so many different ways of how they probably communicate with the world and expressing yourself and getting what they don't want out of their house, outside the world.
Yeah, I'm thinking of a couple of examples, and obviously I won't name names of COs, right? But I'm thinking of like when people were sending you literature about like anarchism and literature about like feminism and other political topics.
No, they didn't want it. They found it. Well, this book is restricted, or it got lost, or they sent it back because it didn't have the right postage mark on it, or it didn't have great books included, or they just felt like they just do whatever they want, basically.
Yeah.
They didn't want me to have it.
So it feels like some of these policies, right, like they change constantly. It depends on the CO that you're engaging with, right? It's always in flux and it's always based on somebody's like personality.
I don't know my mail. Now I started a thing where I got postcards when my friends go out of the country and I can't get my postcards how they're because now they're ripping the postage stamps off. So half of my postcards completely just missing because that's a new policy that they started. Or some people can get hardback books in and other people can't. Like my one friend got a Toya Brown book, but I would never get it.
Right, right.
And it just, I guess it just depends on who you are and what it is and who's it coming from.
Right, and I remember the latest censorship that was going through the mailroom where they were disallowing children's drawings with crayon. And so, yeah, that's still a thing.
Well, again, it's who you are.
Right, well, okay, fair enough, fair enough. And who are you?
Oh, I'm nobody. They want to stop me every way possible. And they do not want me to get anything. They hold me back every way. I can't even get a good job because I want to for what reason.
Yeah.
I can't tell you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I could tell you, we've talked about that. We've talked about why.
But we can't speak about that
Right.
because then I'll get in trouble for that.
That's right. That's right. Can you Can you describe the kinds of surveillance, right, or the kinds of ways that people are watching you and looking at you that you encounter every day inside, like at Count, or like the voyeurism of looking through, your room window, or mail screening, call screening, visitation screening? Can you just talk about any of the stuff that you're encountering, like the ways that you're being watched?
Well, first of all, the phone calls, and of course, there's 4 cameras on the unit. There's 20-minute interval checking where the officer walks around the unit and takes you to your room. Then you have to line up. They have the count. During count, they come and do positive ID check 3 times a day. 4 o'clock in the morning. 4 times a day. 4 o'clock in the morning, 7 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and 9:30 at night. Where you have to positively ID in your bed by your identification card. You go to chow, you have to be counted and signed out by a fee. If you're gone, if you miss a where you work for 20 minutes, if you have to be signed in to go to chow, you have to be signed in to go to library, you have to be signed out to go to LCS, which is the gym. You have to sign out to go to work, you have to sign out to go to property and pick up your books, you have to sign out to go to clinical where you can check to see where your days are, and update work release, get any type of information that you can. Your whereabouts are known 24/7 while you're here. There's never a time where you're not going to be watched. Then you have to stand at the end of the hallway, and then they're walking out with children into quiet down to your destination. You cannot just come to this one line every 20 minutes where they're walking from the end of the hallway starts, which this is the big building, it's only 2 hallways. They walking from where the end of the hallway starts to where you're going, trying to with the rest of your group in there, like you're herded. Everything is monitored.
Yeah.
No matter what you do. And then the officer's desk is right in the middle of the day, so they can see 26 feet around. There's 2 big mirrors that watch both of the ends of the hallway plus the camera.
That's a lot of surveillance technology. That's a lot of being watched, being recorded. Every thought, like every single thing that we've sent in or that you've sent out, right?
Yeah, of course, absolutely. Nothing gets to me without their approval.
And I'm also thinking
Nothing's
about,
going out to you guys.
right, yeah, absolutely. I'm thinking about now that last time that we were having an in-person visit, right? And over the summer, and we had that really bizarre kind of like, I don't know, really surreal moment of you mentioning that people were name dropping a lot of our names, of how we look on the internet and the things that we were saying on the internet. Is that a topic that we can vaguely address now or no?
All I can say is that people are watching the people that I talk to and who are my good friends and people that come and visit me.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, how do you know? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I was like, what? How do you know that?
Yeah.
They're like, oh, well, it was on there, and I guess that's a pretty popular thing that we watch because we're all included. Oh, okay. All right, I didn't know that, but
Yeah.
okay, good to know there's something to watch out for.
Yeah, and after we end our call, I can fill folks in here a little bit more on the details, in the vagaries, but like, I just can't not have that mentioned, that like multiple forms of my identity are known by people who only know my state identity, right, when I go to visit, except they know all my other names.
They know all the other names also now.
Yeah. So can we talk, oh, go for it, sorry, I was cutting you off, babe.
No, that's fine.
Okay. I want to talk a little bit about some of the like common like barriers or the things that prevents people from accessing different kinds of like technology while inside, right? So all the things that come up for us, right? The poor quality of the devices. I mean, how many MP3 players have we had to replace, right? The poor bandwidth of the Wi-Fi. Yeah, I know, it's been 7. And remember, like,
Because they're so fragile.
well, and I mean, just sweat or general use or dropping them. And how much does one of those things?
Sweaty and it's over with.
How much does one of those things cost now at commissary?
It is $125, $130 with tax, I believe.
Yeah, and so we've gone through 7 of those so that you can send emails, so that you can have music, so you can correspond with us in that way and have like a little bit of, solace with that
That's only
thing.
for the name.
Right.
That's only for the
Well, so what else costs money? What else costs money?
The music subscription, the game subscription, to be able to send and receive emails, the charger, the headphones, all that. So it generally comes out, say you buy a year worth of music, that's 200 a year worth of games, it's about 50. Emails, they cost about 30 cents per email, and I send about, I don't know how many of those per day, and but that's back and forth. Plus the charger is $20, the headphones are $10. So any of that goes wrong, or there's a glitch in the system, which happens almost every day, where a power box turns back on, the Wi-Fi doesn't want to connect, so therefore I cannot get music, games, or my emails. I have to wait for them to come back and review the system or whatever, and that happens multiple times over the week where I can't even log into my stuff because the system cannot connect to the server. But they don't refund you for those days. They just tell you basically to deal with it, that GTO is going through whatever they're going through.
Well, right, we missed Christmas together last year. You know, like because of the Wi-Fi, because of the poor bandwidth quality, and Wi-Fi went down at Decatur, and then GTL, because it was a holiday, had no one as an emergency respondent for video visitation, and so we did not have a holiday together because of the poor technology and the poor infrastructure for that technology, right?
I've literally learned not to cover anything anymore. Like, there's nothing, because it's just they cancel it, and then if I get my hopes up, I'm going to be crushed even worse. So I'm like, it's probably not going to work, and then it does, I get happy.
Yeah. So having to manage those expectations that we build up, and those moments that we plan on, and just not having them.
But then they have you sit up there for about 40 minutes before it actually starts.
Right.
So you have to get shut down, you have to cough, take all your clothes off, and then you get dressed back in, and then you're supposed to go. You sit here for 40 minutes just for them to say, oh, it's not working. Why did you come in 40 minutes ago? So that's here.
Right. And so I just, for emphasis, because I don't know if everyone in the room, I don't know your level of involvement with the criminal legal system, but Alicia's talking about a visit that's a video recorded visit, not an in-person visit. And she's describing the shakedown process that you go through at an in-person visit, right? And they do that for video visits as well. And so the squat and the cough, the full body shakedown, the hair check, all of it, that happens before every video visit as well. And so we were talking about the sheer, for those of y'all who are just joining us, we're talking about the sheer exploitative costs of all of the tech devices, which there are very few, right? There's the MP3 player, and they're moving to a tablet-based system now that costs a little bit more money as well in the Illinois state prisons. And so we're talking about the exploitative costs at commissary. We're talking about the exploitative costs of the subscription plans and the communication plans with which to access and use these things. And then the poor quality of those devices themselves, the rate at which they break, and your family has to scramble to get money together to replace them, right? The poor Wi-Fi and bandwidth, so that you can't actually use them even though you've spent all this money trying to be able to access and communicate in this other way. And Lily, maybe could you talk about why might you prefer to try to use the email system versus snail mail? Why might you want to do that more? Why might you want to have that technology at your disposal?
Because my mail never gets to me. Never. My mail, when I was at Logan, my name got called for mail every day, and multiple letters to people that are showing me support and solidarity, and now I might get a piece of mail every now and then, maybe once every 3 weeks.
And I'll talk with folks.
It's not my mail.
Right, and I'll talk with folks after we end our call in just a second about why that is too, so that's not on the phone as well. But yeah, so it's just a complete lack of access to the United States Postal Service.
And at least that I know when I write these emails, I know that there is somebody here that is responsible for why my email did not go through, and then therefore I can go and talk to them and be like, why did this not go through? Well, I know that I got an email because I got my vouchers. So I know I have an email that goes along with it.
So there's a little bit more of a follow-up process there too. So maybe this could be our last question here, and I just want to thank you so much for dedicating part of this time that we're talking together and using one of our phone calls for this. I'm really glad that your voice is with us today and in this space, and I wish that you could fucking be here in person. and you will be very soon. And I know, it's so soon, babe. It's so fucking soon. I'm sorry I'm swearing on the live stream. Considering like all these obstacles, right? Everything that we've been talking about, why do you think that we've been able to continue organizing and growing our friendship, right? Like, have you seen other folks inside navigate like the lack of access or be negatively or positively impacted by using technology? Like, I don't know if you could talk about Sandra or talk about other friends inside, but why do you think we've been able to do this?
We are resilient. We do not give up. We will fight. We call them out when it is wrong. We call them out when they're giving us injustice. We will not sit down. I am not going to be quiet. I am not going to be passive and let them run over me and do whatever it is that they want to do to me because they feel like I'm an inmate and that I do not have a voice. I will not let that happen. If you make sure that I do not let that happen, that is why we continue to have these communications, and that is why we continue to grow, and that is why my voice is out there, because you make sure that we don't quit.
I fucking love you. I fucking love you so much.
Oh my God, and then Sandra Brown, she is like the most magnificent person that this lady got her, she has her doctorate, I believe.
Oh, it was her master's, I think, but yeah, I mean, same difference, right? Like, that shit's hard.
She's working on her doctorate.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure she told me it was doctor.
Okay.
Doctor
Okay.
Sandra Brown.
Oh shit. Okay. I've got to write to her.
Yeah, that woman right there, that's amazing. She will not be told no. She told me before, when somebody tells you a no, 5 other people might say yes. You hear 5 other no, that's 10 more people that might say yes. She keeps fighting because there is a yes out there.
That's right.
She's an amazing person. They don't play with her. That's the woman, they will not. There's so many other people like Angie Oaks, Rhonda, I don't know, she's at work for me with the murder.
Okay.
She is at work for me because she did not take no for an answer. You know what I mean? There's so many people that have fought the system and they might be able to keep some of us down, but there's going to be us that are fighting for the rest of us.
That's right.
We're not gonna let them continue to tell us no. We're not gonna let them continue to keep us in here. We're gonna fight for our rights. And people like Sandra and all of the campaigns that came forward for the little ways that we have now. The little things that we have now is because they have made that way. I just want to be a part of that information away for the people that come down.
Fuck yeah. If you, in our last just couple of minutes here, if you had anything else that you wanted to say to a room full of people who are upcoming law students, who are sex workers, who are former sex workers, who are journalists, who are community that give a shit and showed up and want to have these conversations, what else do you want to say? What else do you want people to kind of like leave thinking about?
Just remember who you are and don't ever lose yourself no matter your circumstances.
Thank you so much, babe. Thank you so much for taking the time and for sharing your wisdom and experiences and the fucking struggle that is existing and organizing inside. And I'm so thankful for you, and I'm so thankful to have your voice in the space today. Thank Can people on 3 shout "Free Lily"? Yeah. 1, 2, 3. Free! Soon. We love you so much, babe. I'm gonna talk to you really soon, okay?
Okay, I love you too.
I love you. Bye. So I'm so shaking because I really thought they were going to keep her from being able to access that phone call because that email didn't go through right, and that's usually a telltale sign that something else is happening. So I'm really thankful that we were able to have Alicia's voice in this space. A couple things that I wanted to let y'all know about before we can open it up for some questions. Our time, I cut it off because the announcement of like the ending of the phone call was about to happen. So I wanted to be able to say I left her before that announcement cut us off. So apologies. The instance that I was talking about with Alicia when we were at the in-person visit the last time, right, which we're shook down as well, though we don't have to squat and cough, right, underneath our top underwear has gone through, right, our hair is searched, our shoes, the bottoms of our feet are searched. And so there's a full shakedown in Illinois and in most prisons that you will go if you visit friends and comrades inside. So we do full shakedown. She has to do a full shakedown. And then we sit in a room, and one of our comrades is a cis man, and Lili's basically adopted bigger brother, and he cannot sit next to her. He has to sit across from her at every moment, and anytime they want to engage in a hug, one of the COs has to come over and survey and watch the hug that's being given. Also, all of our hugs are monitored and watched as well, and any extended touching is disallowed. So this last time that we were visiting, the time before that, the extended touching, she was trying to braid back my hair. She wanted to practice some new braids, and that was disallowed. But the CO before that allowed it. Anyway, to speak to Alicia's point about the arbitrariness and the mundaneness of the true evil of the carceral system, right, is interacting and limiting this touch and connection, right, at every turn, and the varying degrees of that. This last visit, we're sitting there, and the CO who was on duty at visitation was like, and they're probably going to watch this later too, name dropped one of our comrades' sex working profile names, and then name dropped mine as well, and had gone through, it was very clear, had gone through our Facebook page, the Justice for Alicia Walker Facebook page, and had kind of been trolling through the likes and matching images and matching names. I say that not because it's shocking, that's actually not shocking, but saying that as also some knowledge sharing. If you have a comrade inside, if you're doing a popular defense campaign type situation, if you're engaging in some kind of defense work for a criminalized survivor, you gotta be ready for these things, right? And so take those steps to protect yourself online as best you can. Right? It's never a complete fail-safe, but you've got to take those steps because they will use their off time while in the prison to troll through all of your social media pages. It became very apparent that they weren't just looking at the Facebook page, the Justice for Alicia Walker Facebook page. They were looking at our Twitter account for support hosts. They were looking at adjacent Twitter accounts as well and tracking our kinds of posts about being dissidents, being anarchists, being communists, being leftists, being, people who were engaged in lots of different kinds of community organizing, prison and police abolitionist work, very specifically. And so they were matching these things and then seeing our other accounts, our other identities and expressions of working identity, how those were being connected. And they were, learning about us, right? Gathering data, gathering intelligence on us. And so that's that particular instance that we were talking about, and there's been a series of COs who've kind of taken that on as their work to monitor us, right? And then I also wanted to mention there was another thing that Alicia brought up, mail censorship. So one of the things that began happening a few years ago at Decatur, where she is now, we started realizing that we were sending photographs, we were sending letters, we were doing letter writing events, right? It's incredibly important to write to incarcerated folks, primarily because not just building relationships, right, but it's a harm reduction tactic. It can help signal to COs and prison administration that they have folks on the outside who will take action if anything happens to them, right? And also it's that harm reduction and mutual aid, mutual care relationship that you build with folks. Being like, I have your back, I am listening, you are not being made invisible, we know who you are, we see you, we love you. And so we were having these writing events. We follow all the policies to a T, right? Every single one of them. No crayon, no marker, we don't graffiti the outside of envelopes by drawing designs of love or, beautiful shapes and making art. We don't do any of that. And we would probably get together at each of these events 50 to 100 letters, right? And she was saying at Logan, she was being flooded with this stuff, so it was a little bit more of a lax mail room, censorship and screening. And then all of a sudden at Decatur, nothing. 1, 2 would be let through. So they could say, oh, we're not censoring your mail, you got mail. You got 1 letter last month. And we're talking hundreds of letters that are unaccounted for, hundreds of photographs, hundreds of postcards. Because over the past 4 years, we've built something that we're very proud of, right, which is a popular defense campaign based on mentorship and really leadership from an organization called Survived and Punished, and some of their affiliates like Love and Protect and Moms United Against Violence and Incarceration. And so with that tutorship and mentorship and drive toward building this popular defense campaign, we've generated a lot of support. We've raised a lot of money. That's how we've been able to replace every device that's been broken, make sure that Lily has commissary needs met, make sure that she can stay in communication and let us know when shit goes down. But also that means that we generated petitions that we were mailing in to the warden, petitions to the governor, and then just letters to her, which never arrived, right? And so these things have to be talked about when we're having conversations around prison technology and surveillance, right? Because we're not just being surveyed, right, outside as sex working people, right? Like Alicia was experiencing different kinds of state-based surveillance while outside, right, of the prison system, and after going through the criminal legal system, right, being held without trial for 18 months, etc. Poor and, really deeply inhumane treatment. Well, I say that, all prisons and jails and detention facilities are inherently inhumane. Was going through all of that prior to going into prison and experiencing another layer of prison technology and surveillance and state-based violence that is surveillance. And so I think having that conversation and being able to include our incarcerated comrades is incredibly essential in developing our analysis and practice, either if we're going into a legal profession, right, if we're reporting on these issues, if we're organizing within community, because our central work should be, I think, to center those voices and platform folks so that they can actually tell their own stories, so that they can actually speak to their experiences because they are the experts in their own lives, right? And we can learn a lot from them, and also organizing alongside of folks has such a beautiful and rich history in the prison abolitionist and feminist movements.